Hi, in this video I've teamed up with GCRadix to show off some of their new products. Today I'm looking at two of their sound boosters, which are smaller libraries designed to add more detail to your designs. They currently have two sound boosters out, Mega Gear, which is a collection of more general mech recordings with a lot of variety, and Sushi Gore, which is a super detailed gore and combat library. So to showcase these libraries in the way they're meant to be used, I've created an unfinished sound redesign from Mortal Kombat 1, and I'm going to fill out all the detail using these two sound boosters. First, let's look at what I have so far before adding the boosters. So you can hear a lot of the bigger abstract stuff has some good coverage. I think the thrusters are sounding good, the gun and explosion sound pretty full, but definitely there's no sound for when the character gets hit, and the mechanical parts are really lacking in a lot of detail, which is what I'm planning on filling out with the boosters. Now let's look at what I've added using the sound boosters. I've split them all into two groups called Hits and Mech. I'm going to look at Hits first, and I'll just go through it layer by layer. So firstly, I have these thumps. These are from Sushi Gore. These are from the Punch asset, and I'll show you the original file first. So I've just chopped these up and taken just the transients and placed that basically anywhere where the enemy character gets hit. Here's how they sound just raw on the track. And then processing, I have Subsynth, which is adding a lot of low end and keeping the low end of all of them quite uniform. Then Transient Shaper is just taking the sustain and tails down because I wanted to leave room for the other gore that's a bit more detailed and has more high-end information. And then Ozone is just taking some of the high-end down. So here's how they sound with processing now. Next is these metal layers from Mega Gear. These are from the Snap Solid and Resonant Mechanical Snap assets. And they're being pitched up and layered to make this kind of interesting cadence after the thump hits. So here's how each of them sound raw. And the other one, which just has a little bit of frequency shifting on it. I'm processing them together a bit with just a little bit of M ratio MB, which is mainly to bring out the tonal elements because the hit group already has quite a lot of noise with all the gore stuff, and I just want the tones out of these. Then Ozone and Equalizer kind of doing the same thing, just taking out everything except those tones you can hear. They're kind of all sitting around here, so everything below that is just unnecessary. So here's how they sound with the processing. Next is the gore layers, and of course these are all from Sushi Gore. These first two layers are all from the Skull Crusher and Neckbreaker assets. There's kind of a mix of both in here. This one I'm just pitch shifting down a little bit to make it a little bit bigger, and this longer one I'm EQing just to accentuate the low mids a little bit, so it's again in a slightly different frequency space to the shorter ones. So here's the short ones on their own, and then being pitched down. Then these slightly longer ones for the more kind of big impacts. Then the final layer in this group is the Blood Splat track, and this is from the Gut Squeeze. I'm just taking out a lot of low end and accentuating the high end because it's supposed to be like the blood falling on the floor after the character gets hit. Again, these are kind of only accentuating the biggest hits, so here's how they sound. Then the gore group all together with just a bit of EQ to suppress the frequencies that are mainly being taken up by the metal and take out all the unnecessary low end. Sounds like this together. Then with some processing on the main stack with distortion, compression, transient shaping and EQ, along with a little bit of convolution to give it some space, the hit group sounds like this all together. So for this other group, Mech, I'm using Mega Gear to add detail to the mechanical elements of the scene, like the thrusters and the gun appearing and disappearing. These are from the Ultrasonic Mechanical Lever assets, which is one of my favorite from the pack. and it's one of the main layers in the thrusters opening as well as the gun appearing. Then next is the cylinder. It's just called that because it's from the metal cylinder assets. These are adding some slightly more complex mech sounds to the gun specifically. Layering loads of them up is kind of what gives you a nice complex sounds. And then you can see I'm slowly building out this cadence with the gun appearing and disappearing. Especially having them be different pitches gives it a lot of interesting movement, makes you think there's a lot more going on in terms of the actual mechanics. And I'm pitching them around a bit because everything in both of these packs is at least 96 kilohertz. Some of it is above that, like 192 kilohertz, which means that pitching it around quite drastically will still leave you with all of the frequency information intact, which is really useful, especially when you're kind of trying to make things sound a bit bigger and a bit heavier for a scene. This layer, small hit, is just from the ultrasonic mechanical clink. This is all getting pitched down a bit, and again, it's just adding another part to that cadence. And this just has a little notch EQ at the top because when I pitched it down, I brought a kind of high resonance down to the audible range. You can see there's that little bit there that's poking out that I didn't like, so turn it on. Next is this small reverse track. These are from the ultrasonic mechanical movement sequence asset. These are mainly being reversed to give a nice lead into some of the more hard-hitting impacts in the other tracks and to make it sound a bit more sci-fi. And then mainly for the gun coming out and going away. Then finally these big hits adding a lot of weight and a little bit of space to the mech group because the other layers are quite small and very close. Also adding a bit of extra noise, and some of them I've pitched pretty far down just to make sure that they're occupying the right frequency range. So here's how they sound. So before processing, here's how all the mech layers sound together. And then processing, I'm doing quite a lot, but it's all quite subtle and it's all there to bring out existing characteristics in the sound rather than to create a kind of fundamentally new sound. Parallel pitch shifting is a trick I learned recently. So you keep a lot of that high detail intact and then you make it sound like there's more stuff going on that's a bit lower. Envocoder is only being used a little bit here just to soften out some of the high end and some of the transients and make it sound a bit more sci-fi and has a bit more of a softer attack. Then frequency shifting again is just bringing the whole thing down a little bit. It just makes it like a little bit heavier. OTT, Ozone EQ, and Decapitator are all being used just to compress and fill out the high end a little bit. Ozone is just accentuating the highs and high mids because they're mainly what I want to shine through here. And Decapitator, I'm only mixing in and only driving a little bit, which is another trick I learned recently to make your high end sound a bit more fizzy and full without actually making it sound distorted. Then Kilohertz Compressor is just sidechaining this whole group to the thump layer of the hits just so they stand out because they're kind of the most important thing in the scene, I think. Kilohertz Convolver, same thing, just putting it in the space, same settings as the other one. And then PsyQ, giving it a little bit more focus in the highs and taking a bit more of the lows. This is mainly more for coloration than anything else. So with all of this processing, here's what the mech group sounds like. So now that I have all the sounds down and kind of full coverage, here's the full redesign before mastering. So the final result with the sound boosters and with the mastering chain sounds like this. Now for the review of the sound boosters. I think they both serve their purpose well and definitely helped me flesh out my redesign, and I can see both of them having a lot of use for creating single assets too. I felt like Sushi Gore had some more obviously designed sounds, and Mega Gear felt like it could have had some more complex or layered assets that felt more designed, but overall I enjoyed using them. And I really like the idea of the sound boosters too, as supplementary libraries to build out your collection if you don't have enough of these kind of sounds. So that's going to be it for this video. Thanks again to GCRadix for sending over the product, and thank you for watching. I'll have the links to all their stuff in the description down below.